Good morning. Welcome back to Open Med School. Today I am going to discuss the difference between epilepsy, seizure, and convulsion with an MCQ. This is a history. A 25-year-old is admitted with a history of fever, headache, and jerking of the left upper limb, followed by the whole body. What will be your diagnosis? The options are given. So before going to the correct option, let us think what is epilepsy and what is seizure and what is convulsion. The word seizure came from Latin word meaning to take possession of. So that is the meaning of seizure. So what is a seizure? Seizure is an abnormal, excessive or synchronous discharges of cerebral neurons leading to various manifestations. It depends upon from which side the excessive activity occurred. So suppose it is in the motor region or motor cortex, you get involuntary movement. That movement, involuntary movement is the convulsion. But sometimes the seizure activity may not be identified by observer. It can be psychological feeling or experiences. Sometimes it may be a sensory in the form of a olfactory sensation which is called uncinate seizure. That is, a patient is experiencing a sensation which others, a smell, acrid smell, which others are not feeling, or some unusual other experiences. So hope the term seizure is an electrical phenomenon. So now come to what is epilepsy. Epilepsy is the tendency to have recurrent seizures. So epilepsy is a condition in which the person is liable to get a chronic problem. A chronic underlying process is there. Then only we call it as a epilepsy. So a single seizure or a single episode of convulsion, you cannot say that the patient is having a epilepsy. So the first option A is wrong because it is not a epilepsy. Only if there is recurrent episodes, you can say. Again, this recurrent episode should be unprovoked. For example, somebody with hypoglycemia, recurrent episodes of hypoglycemia leading on to recurrent seizures, even though they are getting recurrent seizures, they can't be called as epilepsy. So it is an unprovoked episode. Here the patient has got a fever, headache, so some infectious process is there. So it is not an unprovoked one, so it is a provoked one. Okay, so what is the prevalence of epilepsy and seizure? The lifetime chance of getting a seizure is around up to 10%. If we take the whole population, the incidence of epilepsy is around 0.3 to 0.5%, and approximately 5 to 30% per thousand are having epilepsy. So that is the incidence and prevalence that we should remember. Sometimes we call some epileptic syndromes, febrile seizures, juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. These are all syndromes. Because of the clinical feature, EEG abnormalities, you can identify a certain pattern of disease and they are called the epileptic syndromes. Typical example is the juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. It occurs in young age. They will get with the excessive startling reaction like movement, they get a jerky movement and followed by can get a generalized convulsions also. So that is the difference between epilepsy and epileptic syndromes. So we have discussed the three terms. So most important thing to be remember is epilepsy is a tendency to have recurrent seizure. So even with one seizure, if there is an EEG abnormality is there, that person can be, there may be a typical, for example, somebody with absent seizure, they will have EEG abnormalities which is characteristic, and such cases there is a tendency to get recurred. They can also be called. So with one episode also you can call somebody as a having epilepsy if there is a tendency to recur. Hope these points are clear to you. So in this answer here, the correct answer will be B. That is a focal to generalized seizure. So now we go to little into the classification of the seizures. The 2017 International League Against Epilepsy has classified seizures depending upon the site of origin. So if the clinical features are arising due to an abnormality arising from a particular focus, they are called a focal epilepsy. So as mentioned, seizures are electrical activity, hypersynchronous discharge. You can see the electrical activities here. So patient will be, all the manifestations can be explained by the involvement of abnormal activity arising from a particular focus. That is why it's called a focal epilepsy. In the second group is major classification is the generalized seizures. Generalized means from the very beginning the patient loses consciousness. So here you can say the multiple areas are simultaneously activated, or the patient loses consciousness from the very beginning. Such a seizure is a generalized seizure. The characteristic feature is sudden loss of consciousness. So here in this patient, here involuntary movement jerking on one side means it is a focal, starts as a focal seizure, then it is secondarily getting generalized. So that is the difference between focal and generalized seizure. This will be discussed in detail later. So this is in brief summary of the classification of seizure types, the basic version 2017 International League Against Epilepsy. As mentioned, first is the focal onset seizure. So there is focal onset followed by generalized. We have explained these two. Sometimes you may not be able to distinguish from where it is arising. Such cases can be put as unknown onset. So there the first level we have got a focal onset, generalized onset and unknown onset. When the focal onset, again you divide into two depending upon the level of sensorium. If the patient is fully aware, he stays here, I got involuntary movement on one side, the head is turning to one side, etc. That is when he is fully aware. So this is a focal onset with full awareness. If it is motor onset, we call it as a, again it is a motor onset seizure. Focal with awareness. Sometimes this may spread to the other side, as in our patient you can say focal to bilateral, and the movements are tonic-clonic, you call it as a focal to bilateral tonic-clonic seizure. Sometimes the presentation can be non-motor, so here we call that a focal onset, patient is aware, and this is a non-motor onset, and if it comes, and this is the way you describe. The second group of focal onset is the focal onset, but the patient is aware of, but they have got not aware fully, they don't lose consciousness, but there is impairment in awareness. So patient is will not fall down unconscious, they are in an altered level of consciousness. So it's not fully unconscious, they are not aware of what is happening. Such a seizure is called focal onset with impaired awareness. For example, this was previously called as the temporal lobe epilepsy. The classical example is the patient may smack the lips, move around, loosen there and here and there, and they are, suppose they call them, you call them, they will not respond. So they are unaware. This is called the focal onset with the impaired awareness. So basically, focal seizures are divided into focal onset with the full awareness, with awareness, and without awareness. And generalized seizures, again you divide into motor and non-motor. Non-motor is the typical absent seizure, or we usually call it as the petit mal seizure, the absent seizure. Motor can be tonic, clonic, myoclonic, different types of seizure are atonic. Then unknown seizures, again you divide into the basic two classification as the motor and non-motor. If you don't know anything, you can call it as unclassified. So this is the simplified version of the International League Classification 2017. So coming back to our patient, Patient is not having epilepsy. It is a provoked seizure. It is focal onset with the motor onset and with a secondarily generalized. Hope this was useful to you. Stay tuned for next sessions on epilepsy. Thank you. Bye.